Hello and welcome to Sticky Notes, the classical music podcast. My name is Joshua Weilerstein, I'm a conductor, and I'm the music director of the Orchestre Nationale de Lille and the Aalborg Symphony. This podcast is for anyone who loves classical music, works in the field, or is just getting ready to dive in to this amazing world of incredible music. Before we get started, I want to thank all of my Patreon sponsors for making Season 10 possible. If you'd like to support the show, please head over to patreon.com/stickynotespodcast. And if you are a fan of the show, please take a moment to give us a rating or review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. It is greatly appreciated. First of all, apologies for the recording quality of this introduction. It's because I am in Aalborg without my microphone. We are doing a recording this week with the Aalborg Symphony of the 2 Strauss horn concertos and the Steingrimmer Rohloff horn concerto with the legendary Stefan Knüpfer of the Berlin Philharmonic. Recordings are often a very stressful process, but with Stefan and our producers and the orchestra, it has just been a joy every minute. So we cannot wait for you to hear this recording. This episode is another collaboration with G Henle Publishers. I've really been enjoying this collaboration, all about Ravel and friends. This is a little bit of a different episode in this collaboration, in this set of episodes. I talked with 2 different people. One is the editor-in-chief at Henle, Norbert Müllemann, and we talked all about editing Ravel's music. And that sounds a bit nerdy, but if all of you remember, way back in the pandemic, I talked with Norbert and also with Stephen Huff, the great pianist, about Haydn piano sonatas. And Norbert was so brilliant at explaining the process of editing, not in a way that only scholars could understand, but that anybody could understand, from a musician like myself to maybe you, a listener who's never looked at a score before. So I was really happy that Norbert rejoined the show to talk about editing Ravel, which is a whole different kettle of fish to editing Haydn. The second part of this episode is an interview with Stefan Knüpfer, who is a brilliant piano technician. And this episode was in connection with a masterclass that took place in Munich last week with the legendary pianist Pierre-Laurent Aimard, where the topic was specifically about how to get or how to recreate the sound that Ravel might have heard when he was listening to his music being performed, or the sound that Ravel himself tried to create when he was performing. And talking with Stefan was really an experience like no other, because this is a person who really knows everything about the piano, who knows everything about sound. And again, even though it gets into very, very nerdy territory, I think if you're listening to this show, you probably like nerdy things anyway. But even if you don't, this was fascinating to me, and I learned so much from this conversation. So I really hope you enjoy it. And without further ado, on to Norbert Müllemann. So, a big thank you and welcome to a return guest of the show, Norbert Müllemann. Great to have you back.
Hello, Josh. It's a pleasure for me. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So we talked before about Haydn and editing Haydn piano sonatas with Stephen Huff, but I think with you, we were thinking to talk a little bit more generally about the process of how a piece of music gets from a manuscript to the printed page and in a score that you can buy in a store or online or whatever. So right. I think a lot of people think that editing a score means just basically taking the manuscript and typesetting it. But that's obviously not all of it. So can you explain the process of how a piece, say like Ravel's La Valse, gets from a manuscript to the printed page?
Yeah, I can try. I mean, as you can guess, it's quite a complicated and long process, but I'm trying to break it down to the most basic things. So actually, you are right. You could just typeset a manuscript, but that's not what we do, obviously. I mean, first of all, in most cases, it's not the manuscript which is the most important source. And in most cases, we have many different sources. So our first job is to collect the sources. We have to find the sources and we have to compare the sources. And when comparing the sources, we have to ask ourselves which one is the most important source. So we have basically 2 major approaches. You could say the manuscript is the most important source because it's so original, it's so close to what the composer noted down and his original ideas. But on the other hand, you can also say the most important source is a later source. For example, the first edition, because composers tended to publish their work. They wanted to have, people play their music. So they submitted a manuscript to the publisher. And in this process of publishing and correcting the proofs, every single composer started changing things. So actually, the first edition is the most important source when you ask yourself which is the source which contains the last will of the composer.
Mm.
So this is our main focus. The first edition is basically the source we are looking for. So what you could do now is you could just typeset the first edition. But why doesn't that work? And actually, it's very simple because every single source we have in this whole process has mistakes. There's no flawless source. It's always you will always find mistakes. So what can you do if you find your source for the work and the source has mistakes? You have to correct them. You can just not present the mistakes. So what we do is we compare this primary source, this is how we call it, we compare it with the other sources, and we try to correct the primary source by means of the other sources. And so we take into consideration the whole creative process, basically, with focus on the first edition, on the last source, but we try to correct mistakes according to the earlier sources. And most importantly, we try to give account of what we do. So we have to write this famous critical report nobody ever reads.
I read it.
Very good. Thank you. But I mean, it contains all the important information. It says why we change things and why we need to change things, and we explain it to our users. So the score gets 100% transparent. And that's what Urtext is about, actually, having a transparent score representing the composer's will, but also explaining why we change things. But I didn't talk about Laval's now, so maybe I should
No, it's fine. Yeah.
maybe I should try to make it more concrete in the example of Laval's. Actually, Laval's is a very complicated case because, as you know, Ravel published it in 3 different versions. We have the version for piano 2 hands, we have the version for 2 pianos, and we have the famous orchestra version. So for all these 3 versions, we have an abundance of sources. We have manuscripts, we have first editions. So the big question is, how can we tackle this situation? And actually, in the case of the version for 1 piano 2 hands, it's very simple because the first edition has been proofread by Ravel, and we could just take this as a primary source, which is a good thing. But in the process of composing, Ravel started from this 2-hand version, and he composed the other versions almost at the same time on the basis of this 2-hand version. So when he wrote down the other versions, he started changing things in the orchestra version, for example. And in some cases, he transferred these changes back to the 2-hand version. In others, he didn't. So there are various discrepancies between these 3 versions. And of course, they stand alone in a way. I mean, each version should be independent, but sometimes you have the strong feeling he just forgot to harmonize the versions. So this is what our editors had to do. They had to go through the text and to decide, measure by measure, bar by bar, if the version they see needs to have aspects of the later versions too. So that's the difficulty about Laval's, one of the difficulties. Yeah.
I found a facsimile of, this is not about Ravel, but about with Brahms's Fourth Symphony. And I was shocked to find all of these tempo modifications that Brahms had originally written into the score and then clearly tried to erase.
Mhm.
And learning more about Brahms, I understood it's because he felt like he didn't want to prescribe too much in performance and he wanted to leave a lot of things to the interpreter. Um, but it was amazing for me to see that those original ideas, like an animato here and getting faster, or taking time here, or little expressive things that he didn't want to over prescribe things. And obviously, as we get more into the 20th century, composers want to control more and more and more. Like the famous example, which I've talked about a million times in this show, is Mahler, where every note practically has some indication. And Ravel is a little bit like that. He's not as prescriptive as Mahler, but he is unbelievably precise, and was also famously very precise about how he wanted his music to be played exactly as it appeared in the score.
Right.
And so I think a question maybe people might ask when they hear you describe this process is, why does it matter so much to get the composer's final word? But in the case of Ravel, it's clear because he was apparently on his deathbed saying, no, no, you didn't do this diminuendo here, that I wrote in the score.
Right.
But I guess there are many different publishing houses, and without you asking you to criticize any other publishing house, what is the difference when it comes to a place like Henley and this Urtext idea? And I guess the question is, aren't all publishers trying to do the same thing, or is there a special approach that Henley takes that is different?
Very good question. I mean, I could just say, yes, they all do the same thing and we could be finished with it. Because in a way, it's true. I mean, there are many excellent Urtext editions by other publishing houses, and we all do the same. I mean, we don't have secrets or things we know. Everybody tries to do the same thing, but it's a question of a perspective on the Urtext. I mean, when you can either pick a different source, you could, when deciding which source is the most important one, you could either take the autograph or the first edition. So this is something that could be different from publisher to publisher, but it's also about the strategy how to present the urtext, because you can either say the urtext is a closed and finished text, and you can just present the text, or you could document all the variants or many variants that arose in the whole genesis of the work. And this shows in the music itself. I mean, either you have a text without footnotes and without any OSIA systems, or you have, as we have more and more lately, you have a huge block of footnotes on the bottom of the page, which informs the player or the user or the conductor of different readings. So what every publishing house has to decide is, how do we want to present the word text? And this is maybe something special to Henle, that we are tending to open up the urtext a little bit. We tend to present more alternatives because we say we don't want to prescribe to musicians how to play it. If we know there is an important variant, we want to show it, and we want to hand it over to the musician to decide him or herself how to play it. So that's maybe something special to Henle urtext. And what we also try to be is, we try to be practical. I mean, we we try not to be too much in scholarship. We want to break it down to the most basic information, and we always say we only give variants or readings that are crucial to the performer or to the user. Yeah.
This is the truth of why when I was originally approached about this collaboration, I said, oh great, it's Henley, because I always wish that Henley did more orchestral stuff, because I really appreciate that approach so much as a performer, because there are other publishing houses that make decisions for you, and I never liked that, because I want to know the inconsistencies, and I want to know. I mean, what you just described with La Valse is fascinating to me in terms of the orchestral version, because I can study not only the orchestral version, I can look back at the original two piano version and the four hands version and see where the developments came, and you really
Right.
feel like you get into the mind of the composer. And if there's a variant there, it's because maybe they didn't have a decision, they changed their mind, and this you can really
Exactly.
learn from and make your own decisions. I remember my dad, who was a violinist and violin teacher, he he and I were talking about Bach, sonatas and partitas for solo violin, which used to have these editions that were heavily annotated with
Right.
dynamics and expressive markings. And nowadays, that's really not in fashion at all. It's the fashion is to take the manuscript and reprint it, basically. In fact,
Right.
one of my personal edition of the Bach sonatas and partitas has the music, and then on the back pages is a facsimile of the manuscript, so you can
Oh, that's
compare every
beautiful.
note. And he said, it's funny, my students struggle much more with Bach than they used to because now they have to make their own decisions. It used to
Of
be you
course.
just play it as the score says, okay, I'll make a crescendo here. I'll play this in a little more. And now it's just Bach, which is he writes practically nothing for you. So
Yeah.
you really have to choose yourself.
Yeah. I mean, urtext is challenging in a way. It's, there's so much, especially in Baroque music, there's so many things you have to decide. And yeah, obviously.
Um, and when it comes to Ravel, like he was so detailed, he was so precise. You could say, unlike, for example, Beethoven or Schubert, who I mean, Beethoven's handwriting is so notorious, and Schubert's handwriting is less notorious, but is just as problematic when it comes to. I mean, this is very into nerd territory. Whether something is a decrescendo, getting softer, or an accent, this is a huge, has taken up volumes of scholarly literature of what Schubert meant by that kind of marking,
Yeah.
and whether it was if it was longer, if it had this kind of stem, and all of this kind of thing. Ravel was not like that. He was very, very precise and but he's not as straightforward as one would think to edit. So, what are some of the unique challenges that Henley has found in editing the music of Ravel?
Yeah, it's so funny. It's exactly as you describe. I mean, his handwriting is so precise and it's like a piece of art. I mean, you look at it and it's just beautiful and you feel like you can play from it. It's really amazing. But Ravel, actually, he had a very small output, so he didn't compose very many works, and I think he was very slow in creating. And I think writing was part of his creative process. For example, for Jeu d'eau, you have actually three autograph manuscripts. So he wrote the piece down three times, and just because he wanted to change minor details. I mean, he could have corrected the first manuscript, but no. He decided to write it again and even again for a third time. And that's very special, and it shows how much Ravel enjoyed composing and being as precise as possible. The strange thing is, as opposed to other composers, for example, Prokofiev or Rachmaninoff, they were really precise and correct. Ravel was not that correct. He always made mistakes, despite writing down pieces three times, despite proofreading the proofs of the first edition, he always oversaw mistakes. So there's no single source in Ravel's oeuvre you don't have to correct. You always have to correct things. So that's actually kind of strange because when you look at it, you think, okay, it's there, the work is there, and you can just use it. But you always have to change things as an editor, which is a challenge because you have to find these places. One thing about Ravel is also that he worked together with so many musicians. So, for example, in the violin sonata or also in the piano concerto, he worked with people and he
Right.
he listened to their advice and he changed things
Mm,
according to their wishes. And
right.
that's why we sometimes have a first edition being really different from the manuscript
Ah,
because he listened to what musicians told him and he changed things. And sometimes there are no documents on why and when he did it. We just have a different text, and we can only assume he changed it because musicians told him, it's better this way. It's more easy to play, or it sounds better. So that's also very special with Ravel. These very late minute changes resulting from performances he studied.
Norbert, it's such a pleasure to have you. Thank you so much. I hope for listeners who maybe are not musicians or have never even looked at a score before, I hope it's, fascinating to you because it's absolutely fascinating to me and an incredibly important thing as a performer to feel like you trust what you're reading. And that's what you get when you see a Henley score. So Norbert, thank you so much. And I hope we get to do this again sometime.
Well, Josh, thank you. It was a pleasure.
Thank you so much to Stefan Knüpfer for joining me today. Where are you at the moment?
I'm in Vienna.
Okay,
For
great.
some days, I'm back to Vienna. I live in Vienna. And so I'm very happy to be here again. Yes.
Fantastic. And you will be in Munich for this masterclass.
Yes,
Can you
right.
tell everyone a little bit about what you will be doing there?
You I never know before because it's very interesting to be absolutely free in what you are doing and what you are talking about. But I was talking a month ago to Pierre Laurent, and he wants to express the importance of sound, because sound is a I always say sound is an information carrier. So there is no information of the piece of the music if there is no sound. And so we want to share this a little, that he wants to tell the people how to get closer to the sound of a certain composer, in this case of Ravel. And I try to show the people how can I bring this sound into a modern piano, and how to get it out, of course, yes. And this is, it's not in the piano just by DNA or whatever. It's in there because it has been implemented into the piano by a technician. And so this is very, very interesting that the modern pianos, compared to older pianos, they have a very small range of colors, a small range of abilities of different sounds. And it's very important to get this sound into the piano so that the pianist, like Pierre Laurent and his students, can take it out. And that's my job, which I'm going to do there.
Can you elaborate on some of the differences between the modern pianos and maybe the pianos of Ravel's time in terms of these colors and these sounds? Like, what kind of things would a piano in Ravel's time be able to do that a modern piano is not as well set up to do?
Oh, this is so interesting because, I would say, roughly said, from the 1870s till the I would say World War II, we had the highest amount of quality in pianos, the highest amount of different sounds in the piano. That means every piano had its own sound, its own character.
Mhm.
And after, I would say, 1945, 1950, the piano industry got more even. They get more one line, yes. And so after that, the sound gets poorer, smaller, uh, not too many harmonics. And what I want to see is that, or to show is that before, that means 1870 till 1940 something, each brand, we say Bösendorfer in Europe, or Pleyel, Erard, Bechstein, whatever, had its own quality, its own character. And the composers choose a certain quality, a certain character for their compositions. And this is for their music, yes? And this is so interesting to see the different colors, to see the different possibilities of the pianos. So what is the difference? I would say the difference is that
The big question.
yeah, it's like if you have a violin and you say, oh, it's a wonderful violin, but to how to explain sound, this is so difficult because the quality or the secret behind the sound, as you know, are the harmonics. It's a certain combination of harmonics. That means, for example, I myself I own an older piano, and older Steinway piano from 1954. Yes, and we measured it, and we recognized that one single key has more than 50 harmonics,
Wow.
which is really it's a lot. If you have a new instrument, which brand ever, um, you have five, six.
And could you just really quickly, for listeners who are not familiar, could you explain what a harmonic is?
This is it's so difficult because you have a certain it's if you press a key, it has a certain frequency normally. Let's say it's an A. If you press the A, it's 440. And the first harmonics is 880. And then you have different, the fifth, the octave, the what is the next? The third, the octave, and so on. There's a certain amount of harmonics in a certain uh, relation to the frequency. I would describe it differently. If you have a perfume, then it's not a certain smell or yeah you have in, but it's, for example, it's chocolate in, or roses, or whatever. So there's a different composition of different smells in a perfume. And so each single key, each single note has additional frequencies. We cannot, it's an unconscious thing. Yeah, we everybody can hear it, but we cannot say, oh, I hear 440, 880, 170, 60, 1760. This is not, it's not possible. You can calculate, of course, but nobody does.
Right.
Yes. And what I felt when I was listening to many concerts in my life, when the audience, and they have no idea about harmonics, when they are deeply touched by a certain pianist, a certain artist, or a certain composer, it's because of the structure of the harmonics. So the harmonic is the carrier of information. The harmonics are the secret behind the frequency. Yeah, this is what I yeah I would say. It's
I
very
think
difficult to explain.
it
Yeah.
is, it's really difficult to describe. I think Leonard Bernstein has a lecture series about, I mean, we say in English, the overtone series,
Mm.
which he talks about as a sort of fundamental principle of the world, and that these tones exist everywhere, and that we understand them, as you said, unconsciously.
Yeah.
And it was actually part of his argument for tonality continuing through the period, because his idea was that the tonal series is what we understand as music, and I think I take that very seriously in a lot of ways. But I think in terms of the pianos that you were talking about, so your piano from 1954 is 50 over harmonics or overtones, 5 in a modern piano. So, as you said, it's not really a conscious reaction for the audience, but you definitely feel that the more overtones, the more harmonics there are, the more touching a performance can be because of
I
the actual piano itself.
Yeah, I wouldn't say the more as the more touching it is, but it depends on a certain relation of the harmonic scale in itself. And that means if you have a very sad music, then the harmonics should not have too many fifths and too many octaves, because this is a kind of happiness, of joy, and so on. Yes, you need more of the fourth, you need more of the third, of the second, you need more. That means the constellation of the harmonics is very important. Uh, and what I found is that I can adjust this. That means in very old instrument like harpsichords and so on, it's very difficult to adjust it. But in a modern piano, because of the stiffness of the string, because of the stiffness of the soundboard, I myself can adjust the height of the harmonics. And this is what I found. And so I can tune while I tune the piano, I can adjust the height of the harmonics. So the fundamental stays the same, but I can adjust the harmonics. And so I get a certain, how can I translate it? I get a certain feeling, I get a certain mood into the tuning. In German, tuning is called Stimmung. And if I translate it to English, I would say it's is it mood? I would say it's mood. So I can get from a Stimmung, I can get from a tuning, can get a certain mood. And I have to feel this idea of the composition, what the composer wanted to express, or wants, if he's still alive, wants to express. And I have to get in the same feeling or as close as possible, and then I can adjust the harmonics. And you as a listener, you as a pianist, you as an artist, get the same feeling like the composer had or wanted to express his music. And this is very interesting. So it's not a given thing that you tune 440 and the thing is done. Yeah, everything clean, the octave above it's 880 and so on. No, there's a huge world behind the tuning, behind the frequency. There's a huge world. And
So,
you as an artist, sorry, you as an artist know that it's more than playing the black dots in the right time, in the light, in the right moment. It's much more than that. Yeah.
absolutely. And I think for listeners who, excuse me, and I think for listeners to this who are not musicians or have never performed music before, this might sound very theoretical, but I really think that these reactions that we get are based on the things that Stefan is talking about, are based on this idea that if you just reproduce notes on a page, I mean, we have AI now that can very accurately reproduce notes on a page, even write music of its own. And but we can feel a difference. We can feel obviously the person's personality as they perform in something. And I think this obviously goes to the instrument as well. With Ravel specifically, what are the kinds of things that you look for in order to find that personality? I mean, we can talk about a specific piece if you want, or just in general, but sort of the Ravel world, where is that for you?
Oh, this is so interesting because I never did something like this before, I have to admit. And in Munich, we will have not an era piano, which yeah he normally used. Yeah, so Ravel normally used era, but there was not no piano available in a good quality, and so we found in Germany a piano from 1913. It's a Pleyel.
Mm.
And when Pierre Laurent played this, when he selected this piano, I immediately I felt that this is something I've never heard before, never in my entire life. That means, and he said, "Oh, it's close, but it's not in a ra." It's very close, but it's not an Ra. I cannot tell you the difference between Pleyel and Ra. I really cannot tell you. But if he would have an Ra and playing and comparing it, we both would, or I would say everybody would be able to hear the difference. But what the difference is, you cannot explain because it's one, two, three harmonics missing, or a little louder, or a little more dense, or a little more high or low. You cannot judge and say, oh, this is there is a difference. Yeah, you cannot say that. But normally I work with modern pianos. I work with Steinway pianos. In this case, I work with a Yamaha CFX piano, which are, I would say, they are neutral. Compared to older pianos, they are neutral. They can make some things, but not so specific in the sound. The sound in the Era or in the Pleyel or in the Bösenhofer or in the Blüthner or in the Bechstein from, yeah, 120 years ago is so specific. You cannot copy it with a modern instrument. It's not possible. But when I hear a really great artist playing on a neutral instrument, I immediately know where he wants to go, where he wants to go. I feel that. And then I can start bringing the instrument closer to his idea and to transform the instrument almost under his fingers that he feels at the end, he feels comfortable with. That means, if you ask me, how do you adjust the pliel? I would say, I have no idea. I have to read the instrument. You can read the instrument, and I have to make the quality in this certain quality, in this certain sound focus where the instrument already is, bigger and more beautiful. I can do this. And then I try to copy it and to bring it over to the Yamaha CFX. But first of all, I have to read to read the piano, to listen to the piano carefully and say, what is the ability of this Pleyel piano? What is the characteristics of the Pleyel piano? And then I try to adjust the harmonics and the touch and so on to a modern piano. This is what I'm doing. This is what I try.
That's
Yeah.
fascinating. So it's more about using the, let's call it technology, even though it's not technology because it's a piano, but it is a kind of technology to
Yes.
in a way reproduce the world of sound that someone like Ravel would have understood or would have recognized.
Immediately. And that's why the composers from that time, they choose a certain instrument because they were, I would say that the big names of that time had the same quality. So it was not a quality decision. It was a decision of character. And so they choose their instrument because they wanted to express something, their world, their music, by choosing a certain instrument. And this is interesting, maybe, for you, because the sound we hear or we get out from an instrument is not by the hammers or by the strings. It's just produced by the soundboard. It's just at the beginning of a piano, it's just a piece of wood. And all the cells, all the material is the same. It's just cut out from a tree and it's looking the same. But over the years, the wood got a certain information of frequency, a certain information of energy, a certain of information of possibility of a certain length, of a certain height, of a certain weight of the soundboard. And then the structure changes over the years. That means the cells get thicker or thinner. The water goes from a certain spot to the edge, and so on. So it's a living object which adapts itself to the music which is played on. So if you put it in a, how it's in English, is it CT, computer tomography? Computer, it's like a tube. If you're ill, you go into this tube and it's magnet resonance, something like this.
Oh, MRI, an MRI.
MRI, yes. And if you do it with wood, you can see the all the structure, all the music which is given to the wood, all the frequencies. You can see it, you can read it, you can calculate it, but the instrument has to be played, and the playing changes this structure. And this is why a violinist would never give away his instrument, because the next violinist, which quality ever, will change the structure of the wood. Not too fast, but if after 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, you will not recognize that this is your violin. You would say, no, I never played on this violin. And this is so interesting that we, as technicians, we can, I would say, this is kind of programming the soundboard. We can program the soundboard. And this is what I try to do in Munich. I try to read, to listen very carefully to this old instrument, which is already programmed over the last 110 years or more, 12 years, and bring it in an almost new Yamaha CFX, which has now been played like 5 years or something like this. And I try to reprogram this piano to get this sound into this modern instrument. This will be very interesting. It's a pity that you are in Denmark.
Exactly.
I
Oh,
would
that's
be
a shame.
very,
I would
very
love to hear.
motivated. And I try
Yeah.
to demonstrate. I really try to demonstrate. And it's, Joshua, it's behind the frequency. We all know that the key has to be, the note has to be clean, and it has to be well tuned. We know that. Yeah. But behind this, without changing the tuning, I try to adjust the harmonics. And this is a very ah, this is a scary story behind the tuning, yeah, that you can adapt the sound. I found that it's not tuning, it's making the sound. Tuning is always about making the sound or losing it. We say, if we have an instrument, a keyboard instrument, we say, if it's not sounding very well, we say, oh, it's the hammers. We have to change the hammers. We have to voice the hammers. And I say, no, we have to voice the soundboard by changing the pressure. Because if you have for example, if you have a modern grand piano, which you see on stage, you have a soundboard which is like 1 centimeter. It's not more than 1 centimeter. Yes. And on this centimeter, we have a down of wood. We have a down bearing pressure of more than 1 ton. This is 1,000, almost 200 kilograms, vibrating up to 20,000 times a second. 88 keys, 240 strings, and we have to balance all the system. Otherwise, the soundboard is like bent. It's like blocked. And then we lose the harmonics. We lose the sound. And then we say, oh, we cannot express ourselves as a musician because without sound, or let's say it otherwise, uh, without harmonics, no sound. Without sound, no information. So what is the music for? If the composer has an idea what he wants to express and there's nothing he can express his feelings, his ideas with, it's a poor life, yeah, as a pianist. If you have a not sounding instrument, which normally is, yeah, which is almost like every night they have to change the instrument, yes. You know that.
Well, yeah. Well, Stefan, I could talk to you for hours about this. I find it so fascinating. And I'm sure that everyone listening to this will never listen to a piano in exactly the same way as they did before they heard this conversation. But thank you so much for joining me today, and have a great time in Munich. And I'm looking forward to hear the results of all of that.
Thank you.